Hey, good afternoon. Welcome to the driver training webinar town hall meeting. So uh, we'll get started here in just a couple minutes. If
Good
you
to
could
see you
just,
all on the call. Thanks
yeah,
for being here, everybody. Good to see the interest in the subject, and glad that you took the time today to join us.
if you could drop in the chat where you're joining us from, that would be fantastic.
Charlotte, North Carolina, hot dog.
Thanks, Wendy. Appreciate that you sharing that.
You know, Jim, we've done a couple of these this week. I know we're not quite getting started yet. It is 1 o'clock, however, so I guess we'll wait for some stragglers to get on and everybody to sit down and get their popcorn and whatever we want to do. But you know, the last couple of these, we've had some really great comments come back. Right, we've had a really great questions being asked and a lot of good information coming out of these. So I'm really thankful for everybody joining this call to learn a little bit more about building that safety culture and using driver training to motivate drivers. Right.
No, it's a great point. And we want you all to understand that we're here for you. We're building this out to help you learn and talk through some of your challenges and work through some of the things that you all got going on. So it's a kind of a great forum to open up and have these conversations. So
Absolutely.
awesome. Well, I guess we'll kick it off. And introductions. We'll start. I'm Jim Warsdale. I am the Senior Driver Training Manager here at JJ Keller. Prior to being here at Keller, I was in multiple fleet operations roles and on the management side of things. I was a safety director. I worked in supply chain. I worked in a number of different fronts. So all of these conversations are pretty relevant because I ran fleets for a number of years. So looking forward to the conversation. And I will pass the mic over to my partner, Brandon.
Hot dog. Well, thanks a lot, everybody, for being here. My name is Brandon Wooden. I have 32 years in the transportation industry as a driver trainer, CDL examiner, director of driver development, as well as a safety consultant and also a safety program manager for some very, very large trucking companies in the United States. When we designed this, actually the last probably 10 years of my career has been spent mostly in just trying to learn how adults think about jobs that they are about to do. And here's why. What I think we can see over the last 30 years or so is we can see some real trends toward all of these initiatives that we put in place. You know, hey, we're going to do this. We're going to send this learning out. We're going to send this learning out. And yet, I don't know about the rest of you, but I would say that we see the same events, the same type of events, the same type of things that we're always challenged with as we go down the line. So for the last 10 years, I would say most of what I have done in the industry and for JJ Keller and Associates for at least the last 5 or 6 years has been to look at the way that drivers think, look at what they care about, look at how they affect to the training and how they use that training to build their practice. I've often said that a lot of times we have to think of the trucking company or our transportation department as a team with a lot of individual players, and every single one of those players, when they step up to the plate to hit the ball, they are alone in the activity that they're going to do. They can take the training, they can take the batting practice, if we want to use that baseball analogy. They can take their batting practice, the tips from the coach, all of these kind of things. But really, at the end of the day, You have to let them go. You have to let them perform. You've got to let them step up to the plate, and you got to let them do their job that way. So what we want to do with this, and Jim, what we've been trying to do is open up the forum to get your questions. What are the things that concern you? What are some of the things that you're dealing with right now, so that we can work through some of those challenges together. I love to hear. I mean, whenever I've been doing this, and Jim, I don't know about you, but for me, it's been really important that, hey, where are these ideas and these little things that come out of maybe nowhere that we need to start to pay attention to? Where are those trends happening in driver training and driver safety and vehicle safety? So let's go ahead and bring up the next screen. And I want to talk about today, we're going to talk about defensive driver training and building a strong safety culture using third-party certified drivers and trainers. We're going to talk a little bit about the importance of that, but what I want us to do, if it's fair for everybody, and some of you might be on your lunch break right now, or some of you might be just taking an hour to join us, and we really appreciate you taking the time out of your busy schedules, out of your busy day, to be able to interact with this. We want this to be interactive. So if you use the chat, or if you use the Q&A, or even if you want to open up your mic to ask us a question, here's going to be a few of them to think about. I would like to know, what are the challenges you are experiencing currently in your safety program? What are some things that you would like us to address? If you came onto this call, what are some of your expectations that Jim and I can talk about, or we can reference, or maybe it'll be things that we bring up anyway? But let us know. Let us know in the chat. What are some concerns that you have in your safety training program, or your safety culture, or incidents, or anything like that that you would want us to address? Use that meeting chat if you want to. Use the Q&A, or open up your mic. We'd love to hear your questions on this town hall style meeting. So that would be one that we would talk about. Another one, and I think it's important that when we are all on this type of a call, to talk about, what we've learned together, or what we know, what we can share. Can you share any wins that you had? Anything that you kind of say, hey, we did this and it really worked out for us? I can give an example of that if you don't mind. And this is going to be a call that I had just yesterday. Principles of Defensive Driving is a program that is supposed to create a different way of looking at driver behavior, the way that the driver affects to the role of driving the vehicle. Well, Jim, about a year and a half ago, we took this down to South America, to Guyana, actually, to work for a client down there. Now, in Georgetown, Guyana, here's the way, when we showed up to Georgetown to deliver this program, here's the way that all of the Guyanese people that we saw in Georgetown, Guyana drove. They fought for the bottleneck, and then they figured it out. And it was amazing to watch, because these guys were diving into a bottleneck, and then they were just figuring, horns blaring, everybody fighting for every single inch of space. So we were down there for a couple of weeks, working with trainers, working with coaches that would be working with drivers down there, to see if we could get this a little bit more of a safe environment to drive in. So what we started to do is we started to say, why are you fighting for the bottleneck? Why are you deciding to rush up where everybody is? See if you can hang back for a second, let everybody figure out, and then there will magically be space that you can move into. What was so cool about it is that I was on a call yesterday with this team down in Guyana. They want us to come back and do a little bit of work for them, and I think that's very cool. But one of the trainers said, once everybody just started getting their mind wrapped around this thing of, why am I fighting? Why am I fighting for this bottleneck? Is there any reason for me to be there right now? In other words, up with the rest of that traffic right now. Once they started to think, there's not really a reason for me to be up there right now, they said that our accidents went to nothing. We see that drivers are more comfortable, they're more courteous, they're more respectful. In other words, just motivating a little change in the way that we think about being in traffic actually motivated a really huge behavior in the drivers that are driving down there. So I thought that was a really cool win. what would be some of your wins? I'm sure that everybody on this call has some kind of a safety program in place or has some way that they are training drivers right now. If you don't, please let us know that as well. Hey, we have nothing in place right now and we are looking for solutions. Those are the kind of things that we want to address on this. So the last thing, and Grant, you reach out if you want to, or even we'll give you an 800 number if you wanted to call us individually and spend that time one-on-one. We're happy to work with you that way as well. One of JJ Keller's missions is that we help protect people in the businesses that they run. So I know that on the driver training side of this thing, we have worked on configuring programs for hundreds of clients. And every single time it becomes that mission to get it right for that client and their activities, right? So what I want to offer now as well, and I would like to hear from you, if money, time, and resources, if they were not an issue, in other words, everything that we do bottlenecks somewhere, right? It can bottleneck, hey, we don't have time for that, we don't have money for that, we don't have the people in place. If those were not an issue, take a second and start to think about what your ideal driver training program and your safety culture would look like in your organization. Here's why I want you to do that. Once we start to do that, we start to think about everything. We start to think in broad strokes. We start to dream big about what we want this all to look like. And then we can put it into the configuration of how to make those things possible, or how to work within the confines of something, how to look for bottlenecks, how to do all of that stuff and approach this to our drivers. So use the meeting chat, use the Q&A, but if you have a win that you'd want to share with us, or if you have a challenge that you want us to address today, please put that in there, and then start to think about if your driver training program was just exactly what you wanted it to be, how would that look and what would success look like? Use the meeting chat. If you want to unmute your mics or anything like that, we're here to take your questions as well and here to talk about this subject with you. So if we want to move to the next slide, however, even if we keep those in the back of our mind right now, so we're thinking about what that ideal safety culture is. And Jim, the first question I typically ask is, what is safety? What does that mean to me? What does that mean to my organization? How do we look at that without actually defining it by using the word safe? I'll tell a little story. I was presenting at the American Trucking Association National Conference. It's been years ago, but it was on this topic: is building a safety culture or building a strong safety environment, a working environment for our drivers. And the first thing, I had a room full of people, and they were all directors, safety directors, safety managers, supervisors, all of these people in this room. And the question I first asked all of them is, I want to hear you define what you think safety is without using the word safe. And here's why that question came up. It's because if we start to think about the elements that are involved in what safety means, well, are we stopping at no accidents? Do we also want no injuries in there? Do we want compliance to be a piece of this? Are we looking at driver behavior that says that a good, safe driver is also going to be more likely to stay at your company? All of those things, I think, need to get into the mindset whenever we are building a culture of safety at our organization. Otherwise, we end up putting Band-Aids on things and thinking that's going to solve a problem that tends to be a little bit more holistic, a little more granular, a little bit more that we have to think about it as a concept first, and then we can start to build out the individual solutions that we might have, or the individual things that we would try. Jim, you were in operations. Now, what in your way of thinking about building a safety culture, what was one of the key things that you were thinking about when you were building that organizational culture and asking what is organizational culture?
Well, I think it starts with accountability. I think you have to build a top-down system from your leadership at the top. It has to walk the talk, and it goes all the way down to your drivers, right? Working through that, making sure that they are representing what you're looking for, representing the vision. You were just discussing the vision. What is the vision? how do you want it to, how do you want to be perceived, and how do you want to build this culture? I always used to say this, making sure our people came in safe and left safe every single day was my goal as a fleet operations and safety director. Working through those challenges. If there's not a lot going on, that's a good thing in an operation. You don't want a bunch of issues and working through some things. So, normalizing that stuff, and we did that through weekly safety communications, bringing some good conversations to the front. Even the issues we saw that were good, we celebrated those, so people understood what they were. That the bad ones, we addressed them and had conversations around them, and we built rules around that where everybody understood where they could play in the sand, and where they stood. So I think those are all very important when it comes to building a safety culture.
Yeah, absolutely. When we talk about that, Jim, I think we also have to look at what is that and who is involved, who are the decision makers. How does the organization work with the, how does operations work with safety in order to make these things work together? Because when you think about it, at the end of the day, we've got to get the job done. The safest condition for a truck to be in is parked with the brakes set. So anytime we release those brakes and we take that truck out on the road, we're taking a little bit of a risk. What can we do to mitigate the risk? What things can we give drivers to keep them focused, keep them intent on their work? I love this. Sonia reached out about complacency as an issue. I think you're right. And Sonia, the thing that we've always looked at when we look at complacency and driver complacency is, where does it come from? Where does it originate? Think about it this way. You just got your CDL. If you're in an environment where we have CDL drivers, Sonia, I'm not sure what your operations are, but if it's tractor trailer, let's just say, you got to get a special license for that, right? You work so hard, you get your CDL. Thank you. Yeah. So you've got that CDL, and now you go in, and with hazmat, that's even more something that you don't want people to be complacent when they're behind the wheel. But what we have to look at is a root cause of where complacency comes from. Let me tell you what I've seen from an entry-level driver perspective, and being somebody that was a director of driver development, we were getting brand new CDL holders that were coming in, and then we were taking them on their first journeys as a truck driver. And what we saw is that every single one of them came in, and when every one of them came in, if we tried to push them into full operations as if they were a seasoned truck driver and don't give them that ramp up to what they're going to be doing, then what we would see is that every single one of them would feel like, I'm running late, I don't have time for this. Little things like vehicle inspections would fall off. Little things like getting out and looking before they back would also fall off. Why? It was for a very honest reason. These drivers said, yeah, man, I'm running late. I don't have time for this. The truck was good yesterday. Hey, there's nothing back there. As I was pulling up, everything was fine. But it breaks their routine. Has anybody ever seen, and we did the Major League Baseball reference earlier, so let's stay with that one. But when a batter gets up to the plate, they have the same routine every single time, don't they? We've seen it. Batter steps up and he taps the bat, or he, does the gloves thing, and then he swings a couple of times to get loose. And then he gets into position. If he feels himself getting out of position, or the pitcher is taking too long or something, what does the batter do? He steps out of the box, right? Because that's interrupted the flow for what he has going on to get this really important job done. So as a batter gets hurried, or as somebody gets rushed, or if we can interrupt their communication with themselves about to do something, then it will disrupt the pattern of the events that they are about to do in a certain way. For a hitter, that means hitting the ball, right? That means being able to hit the ball when it comes across the plate. For a driver, that could mean actually getting himself or herself into the role of being a driver, doing a certain thing a certain way. So when that is interrupted, or when we get other things that are happening at the same time, what happens is complacency starts to be the little excuses that are put in there, when really the root cause of that typically is going to be that, hey, I'm running late. I don't have time for this. I don't take the time for this. So what do you do? And that'd be the next thing. What would be the way that we could emphasize getting into a routine? The first thing is to help your drivers build a routine. Let them build a routine that works for them to keep them in the proper headspace that they need to be able to do the job successfully. We see this all the time in training drivers, especially in backing maneuvers, that we tend to focus on the what we're doing. Like, here's one for you. How many of you all that have a training program right now, how many of your trainers tell the driver you must get out and look before you back on every backing maneuver? Let's get a show of hands. This is going to be something that is in our policy. Before you back that truck, every driver is to get out and look. Michael, good. Yeah, that's very common in this industry. It is mandatory that you get out and look before you start backing on every backing maneuver. And whereas that's a very good policy to have because it keeps them in that space of what to do. Here's the problem with it. I'm going to give you an example of where this actually turned bad before. If you tell a driver that that is what they are supposed to do, then they will do that. But they will do that because you told them to, because it's a rule, because it's something that they have to do. And you've taken away the opportunity for the driver to do the right thing at the right time based on what they're seeing in the moment. Let me give you an example, because you're probably shaking your head at me right now. You're probably hanging up the call. No, we're going to stay with that. Stay with that. But don't make that the absolute end all with how to back safely. Instead, if you want to make it a policy that they get out and look before they start backing, then start to ask them questions. What are you looking for? What are the things that are going to be, even in a wide open space, what are going to be the things that you want to look for that's going to help you as you get this backing maneuver done? Now what you've done is you've given them a rule to follow, but you've also given them something to look for instead of just doing it because you told them to. I told you I'd give you an example, and I will. I was at a company, and we were looking at vehicle inspections, backing maneuvers, and I was arguing with their trainers about this, where they said, nope, that's what we're going to do. We're going to tell them to get out and look before they start backing on every backing maneuver. That's what we're going to require, and that's where we're going to leave it. And I said, okay, that's fair enough. That's your program. This is a true story. One of their drivers came in and set up for a backing maneuver, and the trainer that I was working with said, "I'll bet he gets out and looks before he starts backing." So there's no doubt he's going to get out and look before he starts backing. You made that a rule, and you're his supervisor right now. There's no way he's going to miss that because that's his job. So he did. He stopped and he waved at his trainer. His trainer waved back. He went back to the back of the truck, got in again, and he proceeded to back into the hood of a brand new truck that was sitting next to him. We couldn't even get him stopped before he had backed 3 feet into the hood on the blind side on this straight line back that had a little bit of an offset. The question is, why? And the reason why was quite obvious. I'm going to get out and look because you told me to, but I'm not really going to get any information from that, and I'm not going to get out and look again whenever things get tight or whenever I have a doubt. What we say is that get out and look just to confirm that you're right. Takes you a couple of seconds to get out of the batter's box for a second. If you'd use that analogy, it really does work too. If you are feeling disrupted by anything, then step out of the batter's box. Step back in again, go through your routine, get what you need to do the job right. So I would say if you put policies in place, that's great, but then have them mean something for that driver's activity. And that's how you include everybody in designing this thing that they can take with them. So giving reasons like Wendy is talking about, emphasizing getting everyone home each day without injuries. I love that. That is a great overall concept because that also takes into consideration slips, trips, and falls. It takes, strains, sprains. Do some stretching exercises before you actually hook a tractor to a trailer. Do some good 3 points of contact, even for rolling up the landing gear and those kind of things. I think that's wonderful. The thing that I would like to leave you with, and it not totally, there'll be more, but one concept I would like you to leave you with is that adults need to know what they are going to do with the information after they've learned it, or they will stop at passing the test because that's all I needed to know. That satisfies everybody. We checked the box. That's all I needed to know was the what to do. And once I've done it, it flies from my mind. I call it the Alice Cooper effect. If we think about it, Alice Cooper had a hit back in the 70s and it was called School's Out for School's Out, right? Does anybody remember that? Give me a little thumbs up if you are an old timer like me that can remember Alice Cooper back in the day. He had this thing, Alice Cooper had this School's Out Forever. And this is what we call the Alice Cooper effect, is that if someone is learning something to pass a test, and that is the only reason that they're learning, once they pass the test, every bit of it's gone. We can all remember this a little bit, and going back to even high school or something like that. We pass our finals, the bell rings. How much do we come back and remember the next year or in the fall when we come back to school again? And the answer is you have to ramp back up again, right? Because we never learned what to do with that information or how I'm going to put it into practice later. So I know we spent a little bit of time on this, Jim, but what keeps you up at night? This is also something that you need to think about. How do you prioritize the concerns that you have? How do you manage the expectations from each one of those concerns, and then put it into this hopper? We typically say, let's use a circular decision-making logic. And here's where the circles actually it's in there, the circles of influence happen here. First, we have to think about where the circle of control is. Who controls the activities that's going on with this driver in what they're doing? Does the dispatcher have control? Do the clients have control? Or do your customers have the control over this? Does just the time of day or the environment for driving make up a lot of the control that's happening in these certain environments? And all of those things need to be recognized so that we can start to put influence on them. Who influences those things? How are those being influenced? Are we setting time standards that are reasonable? Are we forcing our drivers to fight and fight and fight and fight because we prioritize one thing over another? So when you look at what things influence decisions that your drivers are making, look at what they have to control and what's controlling them. And then we can start to work in partnership with our drivers to say, here's something that you can use anytime you're starting to feel a little bit like things aren't working. And then we can give them those tools in their toolbox that they can use to become better drivers. The last one, of course, is the circle of concern. What things are concerning us the most? And you might put that back into the bullet point of what keeps you up at night. But don't let things like nuclear verdicts keep me up at night. If you haven't had any, or if you haven't had any on the road accidents, start to look at the things that lead to those nuclear verdicts or those high high visibility accidents that would happen. And many times what you'll see is that those high risk drivers that are out there doing these things, they either have very limited what they do in these little exercises, or they have very little control over their environment whenever they're in the big situations. Typically what we see is that drivers get into trouble when they start crowding, when they start not applying speed and space management correctly, not starting to ask good questions as they're driving down the road. We start to see that these things get tighter and tighter and tighter, and that's when we start to see accidents start to happen. Jim, you've seen that as well in your career, that it's the little things that sometimes start to build up to these behaviors that we have to then look at in a bigger scope.
Yeah, I mean, listen, you talk about what kept me up at night. It was the little fixed object collisions. It was the backing into an overhang. It was backing into a light pole. It was the stuff that could be avoided. And that was the majority of our accidents. When you looked at our list and you looked at what, they weren't the DOT recordable accidents. It was the little nickel and dime accidents that really plagued the fleets that I ran, and it kept me up at night. for sure.
Millions of dollars every year are spent on fixing doors or fixed object collisions or something like that. And so, again, these are those Band-Aids. Okay, so what are we going to do? We've got a lot of fixed object collisions here. Well, we're going to make everyone get out and look before they start backing. Okay, that's great. We're trying to solve a problem there by giving an initiative and something that is a rule to follow. But what we don't see is that a lot of times actually the behavior that is around what leads to those small accidents is actually motivating behavior even on the road. So if nuclear verdicts or if a major crashes or something like that is keeping you up at night and thinking about the first one that you get, or maybe you've had one before, start looking at the little things your drivers are doing and their behavior in that space. Are they doing a vehicle inspection or are they blowing it off? Are they getting out and looking before they start backing? Are they stretching before they hook up a truck and a trailer? Are they thinking about longevity in the career, or are they thinking about just what is right now? Because when we think about it, drivers, they flame out of this industry all the time because it either gets too hard or they're away from home or some other thing sneaks into this. But it's the drivers that feel like they are doing their job really well. They are feeling like winners when they get out there and they get home again. If you can build a winning culture that includes safety in the way of winning, then you will build a very, very strong relationship with that driver and give them the tools that they need to succeed in the role that they have on your team. If we treat it like the entire team is responsible, we're also going to be fooling ourselves because the driver is ultimately responsible for all of these things. Let's give that driver the best tools that they can have to get out there and get the job done right and to win the day. Jim, let's get to what our Principles of Defensive Driving program looks like. So when we look at our Principles of Defensive Driving program at J.J. Keller and Associates, it actually focuses on these three elements. And the first one we think makes ours just a little bit unique. Before I go into this too much, let me ask this question. You can pop it in the meeting chat, or you can open up your mic or give me a thumbs up or anything like that. Do you have a defensive driving program in place at your company right now? And if so, can you tell us which one it is? If you bought it from a third party, or if it's one that you created yourselves, let me know. Put it in the chat if you're using a defensive driving program right now and who it is. Or if you're not, that also put that in the chat. While we're waiting for you to do that, talking about the Principles of Defensive Driving, that is J.J. Keller's defensive driving program, and it focuses on vehicle inspections, close quarter maneuvering, and then finally narrative driving, or building those habits and those behaviors when we're on the road. A lot of times I get asked this question, so why is it that a defensive driving program that's supposed to be about safe driving principles would focus on vehicle inspections? And it's very simple, because when we think about defensive driving, we don't think about the what is involved. We think about the behaviors that are involved in doing your job as a professional driver. I want my drivers to be wearing the uniform, to be proud to have that on, to be feeling like they're winning at the end of the day, and for their coaches to be telling them and showing them how to win. This has been not for everybody, of course. I know there's different degrees of people's motivation to win, but it is something that I have found in this industry to be fairly routine, is that we're all thinking about the competitiveness of our jobs, and especially truck drivers. Truck drivers typically tend to be somewhat competitive. In fact, I think if you were to line your drivers up in the next safety meeting and to ask who's the best driver in the room, you're going to get a lot of them that are going to puff up their chest and they're going to say, well, I am. And the reason that they're going to say that, when you ask them why are you the best driver in the room, you're going to hear all of the things that motivate them to be the best at something. Now, all we need to do in coaching is we need to just feed those things. We need to feed the ego with enough tools that helps them become, at least in their minds, the best at something. Now, we can put that in with no accidents. I have 1.5 million safe driving miles in this industry. That is true. And I am very proud of that. I also have advanced degrees in career and technical education and adult education. But when I stand in front of my peers or even my academic peers, I'm very proud of my trucking record and that I have never had an accident in a truck. That is how I won as a truck driver. So what is it that makes your drivers proud? What are they very first in telling you that they do about their job and what they do and what they do well? Use the, yep, I've heard that program before, Matthew. It's a great one for your defensive driving. We're going to say that our program, Principles of Defensive Driving, really works with several of other programs. I've heard, some people are using different programs out there, but what we do is we focus primarily on the why, using that see, decide, act model. See, decide, act, and narrative driving. Narrative driving is a little different from maybe the SIPDE program, where what we do is we start to look at the narrative. When I talk about the narrative, and we'll talk about this on the next slide in more detail, but when you create a narrative, then that means that we're actually looking at the real situation that is around us, and we're focusing on those things so that we can make up the story about what's going on. Here's what happens when you make up a story about something. You give it focus. So if I'm saying that, hey, here's a driver coming, we're on a 2-lane road and a vehicle is coming at me. If I look at that vehicle, the next question I have to have is, do I trust that that vehicle is going to stay in their lane, or do I not trust them at all? So let me ask this question as we start to look at what narrative driving means. And I want you to put this in the chat. When you go out and you drive your vehicle, your car, truck, or whatever it is, when you go out, the statement is going to be true or false. You trust that everyone else is going to be doing the right thing. True or false? Pop it in the chat. I'm out driving my vehicle. I'm driving home tonight after this meeting. False, false. Number one answer on the board, I would say survey says number one answer on the board is that everyone says false. Everyone says that they're out there and they don't trust other people to do the right thing. But here's what I'm going to do, and we do this in Principles of Defensive Driving all the time. That is by far the number one answer on the board. Everybody answers, nope, I don't trust anybody. But what I'm going to ask you next is going to help you start to think that we actually do. When you're driving down the road, have you ever looked over and gone, what in the heck are you doing? And it surprised you when somebody did something stupid? Come on, somebody's got to give me a thumbs up, because I know that somebody on this call has come up to something. And yeah, of course. So here is why things surprise us, because we weren't expecting them. We were expecting the other driver to do the right thing. And when they did the wrong thing, it surprised us. By using narrative driving, I'm driving down the road, and that vehicle that's coming at me, they are supposed to stay in their lane. And so I'm going to trust that they're going to stay in their lane. But using narrative driving, I'm looking at that car and saying, I'll bet that guy is distracted right now. I'll bet he's talking on his cell phone. I'm going to start to look for that vehicle moving just a little bit in their lane. I'm going to start to really focus on it, because I don't trust them as far as I can throw them. If they move over into my lane, here's my reaction to that. I knew it. Knew you were going to do that. That's exactly what I thought you were going to do. But if they stay in their lane, I get an opportunity then to say, hot dog, buddy, that's something I didn't expect. I would rather be surprised by vehicles doing the right thing or drivers doing the right thing than I would be surprised by somebody that does the wrong thing. It takes us from a reactive way of driving into a proactive driving. And the way to do that is to go down the road creating the narrative around everything that's going on. Some of the things we have to do that, and we'll get to that on the next slide. But one of the things that I love to talk about with this is that we offer this as a trainer certification program as well. So Principles of Defensive Driving from JJ Keller, we offer it as a direct-to-driver program where we'll come on site and then we would train your drivers, or we can also offer it as a trainer certification. thing that's different about our trainer certification program is that we actually look at building a coach's toolbox using adult learning focus, using how to motivate behaviors instead of teaching the what. We get a little bit more to the deeper level of the why, the how does this mean? What does this mean to you? How would you use this? All of those kind of questions will motivate an adult learner to take ownership of that, put it in their own voice, and then be able to use it in their own voice in real time. This is what the power of narrative driving is letting drivers start to build these narratives and then getting them to start to look even more in advance so that they have time to create the narrative. They have time to be able to motivate to that proper driving behavior. Jim, I've been talking a lot, and we've worked together for a while now, but you know that this is probably my favorite subject. So so if I'm tell me what your experience has been with our trainers out there training other trainers. I've seen that we get some really good feedback from trainers that go through our program that say, man, I didn't think I was going to be learning all of that. I thought I was just going to learn how to test a road test, right?
Well, I totally agree with you. The adult learning modules that they're required to take are high level and they're second to none. When we are on site and we're coaching and we're talking, and we're going to talk about this on the next slide, but talking to trainers on how to train their drivers and change their behaviors and have certain conversations around that it's mind blowing the results that they seem to get when you hear from some of these trainers coming back. Wow, that was a great suggestion. It worked in my fleet. It was a great conversation I was able to have with that driver that was struggling. Working through that, being able to do that, and to talk a little bit more in depth on our training, we covering the adult learner, and adult learners need to know why. So being able to tell that narrative and being able to explain to them why they're doing this and working through this and having those conversations and teaching the soft skills as well to deliver those messages and have those conversations, because not every conversation is going to be great. You're going to have some tough conversations when you're on a range or you're on a road test. You're going to have to fail somebody or you're going to have to correct somebody. And sometimes, in these fleets, they just went to the barbecue with Tommy and now they have to correct him.
Right.
It's a tough conversation. They've been buddies for 15 years. And now you're the trainer, you're the champion of the fleet, and having these conversations. It's a tough thing to do.
I know you and I have talked about this before, Jim, but we often say that trainers, if they stay trainers, then trainers tell a lot of information, they tell a lot of stuff, but coaches ask great questions. And by asking great questions, we motivate that individual ownership, that individual effort and responsibility and accountability by coaching, by asking, why is it that you're looking at this? I remember one. I remember one story. So I was with a driver, and I think we actually get this to the next slide if we want to move to the next slide. But I remember this so vividly. I was on a road test with a driver, and I was sitting there, and they turned their turn signal on what we might have perceived as maybe a little bit early. When we think about training, we think about testing something, it's within these parameters. And this driver just turned his turn signal on maybe just a little bit earlier than I would have liked him to. Well, I could have done, and this wasn't as a CDL examiner. As a CDL examiner, I didn't get to have conversations with him. I could just mark the sheet. But this was a different capacity. So I was out there, and he turned his turn signal on a little bit early. And I looked over and I asked the question, so I see that you turned your turn signal on maybe a little earlier right there. Can you tell me why you did it? That's all I asked. Can you tell me why you did that? And he said, oh, yeah, well, I was looking back there, and I think that I had a couple of cars coming up a little bit fast. And I remember from what you were telling me about narrative driving is that if I see erratic drivers, turn my turn signal on a little bit early to give them time, if they are distracted, to respond to my turn signal and close the loop of conversation. Oh my goodness, I would never have known that was what he captured from the training that we did unless I asked him the question about why he did this during a certain part of the road test. It was powerful because it did a couple of things. First of all, it clarified where the correct answer was coming from for my benefit, because I was curious about why he made that decision, but it also helped him explain his work. This is why I do this. This is how I do this. This is the reason for this. And then we took it that he wasn't there just to pass a test, but he was getting something from that test that now motivates his behavior and becomes a habit. Forming habits is one of those things. We can form bad habits or good habits, but habits are formed over statement and reward, statement and reward. If you're getting fed from whatever it is that you're doing, you are building a habit. So I would say if you have coaches out there on the road right now, teach them how to ask better questions to engage that driver in what they're about to do, and then also get that feedback from that driver, and then you can make little corrections. Let's say that he would have turned his turn signal on a little bit late, and we would have looked over and a car pulled up beside us or something like that, and I would be looking at the driver. Is that surprising you right now? What do you think you could have done to be less surprised in this moment? Not turn your turn signal on a little bit earlier than that because this driver is going to come up and all this. That's a lot of telling. But if we can ask better questions, so what do you think would have happened if that driver that came up on us too quick would have seen your turn signal a little bit early? What do you think that would have done? You're getting the driver to have to explain their job as a professional so that you can see that they are deeply seeding those principles as they go down the road. That's really how narrative driving works, guys. It's going to be, let's look at these things, let's analyze the situation, let's make up stories about the other drivers that are out there and what they're doing, and then let's see that we're motivating to this spatial awareness and this speed and space management. Let's drive on our island. Let's get away from other people. Let's see what we can do to be as comfortable as we can going down the road. So that's a nutshell of the way that narrative driving works. It focuses on real-time events and preparedness for those events. We might be driving down the road on a narrative drive and nothing is going on. But what we might do is say, are we coming up on something where we might want to start to get focused now? We might want to start to do something now. And the answer to that would be, well, I'd say I need to be a little bit more in my mirrors right now because it's starting to get tight. Any one of these things can create a conversation that leads to preparedness for the next thing that we're about to do. The other thing is that we want to recognize the mistakes of other drivers. I don't want my driver thinking that they're all bad and everybody else is all good and they need this training and they're doing the wrong thing. I want to protect them from the other traffic out there that might be making bad decisions that my driver then has to respond or react to. If I can do that, I give them power, ownership, control, and I give them that sense of purpose. Focus on time to make decisions means that we want to see things early. Remember when I said earlier that if you've ever looked over and said, what in the heck are you doing? You are applying the principles of defense and you're narrative driving. Just a little late. It's a little bit too after the fact. That just happened and it surprised me. What I would rather see somebody do if they're doing a narrative drive is say, I see that guy back there. I'll bet you he is going to come up and I'll bet you he's going to try to cut me off. I'll bet you he's going to try to cut me off. One of those kind of things I think is what we're going for there. Finally, if you haven't seen by now in just the way that I'm explaining narrative driving, you'd see that this focuses on driver behavior over what to do. We know what to do. We know that if you were making a left turn, you'd put your left turn signal on. So my question is, why did you forget to do that? Or why did you think to do that now instead of at a different time? Why are we braking early? Why are we scanning the intersections as we go through it? I like to ask those questions because sometimes I'll just say, because that's what you told me to do. That is not a right answer on a narrative drive. If you're scanning left, right, left through an intersection, I don't want you to be scanning left, right, left because I told you to. I want you to be looking for something that's going to help you get through that intersection safely. So it goes to that deeper level of driver behavior and tries to influence that driver behavior in preparedness and time to be able to make decisions. When we focus on creating the narrative, asking what if questions is a really good way to do that. Looking at speed and space management. I know, Jim, to you in your practice, speed and space management is critical because of that 360 awareness, right? We've got to make sure that we're driving on our island. And I think you've explained that before. Go ahead and explain what you're saying about 360 awareness.
Yeah, I used to talk to my fleets about 360-degree awareness, making sure that you know what's going on at all times. And you've got a big truck, tractor trailers, they have a ton of blind spots. Being able to maneuver around them, knowing where they're at, being able to see, making sure you're staying in your mirrors and working through that. And as you were stating earlier, seeing that vehicle that young man saw coming up on him, knew that it was in his blind spot, slowed down a little bit, allowed them to pass probably at that point, and went about his day. It's so important because you're always you don't know what's going to happen, and if you're on high alert, you know what's going on, and making sure that you have that bubble. I love to use the term bubble, just that bubble around your truck, so you can be safe and just go about your business.
I use driving on an island because I would say that probably my number one priority is to drive without stress. I cannot stand fighting when I'm in a vehicle. In fact, I will actually do narrative driving. You and I fly across the country. We might fly to Los Angeles or Atlanta or Dallas, and we get off the plane, we get into a rental car, and suddenly we are fighting rush hour traffic, in one of these big cities. So I actually tell myself the thing. I've been practicing narrative driving for most of my career as a driver. And the one thing that I constantly have to remind myself of is if I'm getting into too busy of a space, I literally say this. This is literally what I say out loud. I don't care if other people are in the car or not with me. I say, Wooden, why in the world are you fighting right now? And then I have a little conversation with myself. I don't know, Wooden. Why are you fighting right now? Okay, well, let's find a space. Let's get on our island. Let's be comfortable on our island. And if we see somebody that wants to be on our island here pretty soon, I'm going to say, how quickly are you going to get off my island and leave me alone? There are a couple of things that I say whenever I'm training drivers. One is that if I am out there driving right now with anybody, I do not care about you. I don't care about you. I don't want to get to know you. I especially don't want to know your insurance information. I really don't want to know your blood type. So the way to avoid that is to get the heck away from you. Let you go have your day and be on my island, and let you go have your day. I'll have my day. And that is what gets us peacefully interacting together, and I don't have to know these other vehicles. Does that make sense? When you think about it, the last thing I want to do is get to know people when I'm a truck driver. So preparing for the unexpected, nothing ever comes out of nowhere. We can say it all the time, and I'm sure you've had drivers that have said something, hey man, it came out of nowhere. They came out of nowhere. Literally, the laws of physics do not apply, that things cannot come out of nowhere. So it came out of somewhere. What is the correct answer? You just didn't see it in time. So we try to eliminate those things by saying, let's be prepared for this stuff. Let's not multitask, even in our minds. I know that we had on a call before that when we were talking about what is the issue that exists with distracted driving the most. And I think that what we heard on a previous call, you guys can agree with me or not, but it's going to be cell phone usage. I think I got a question on Tuesday on this about the whole hands-free single button to answer a call kind of thing. And whereas that would be something that you would say is a physical distraction, having to look away, look to press the button, what I'm going to tell you is that I see conversations on the phone while we're driving more as a mental distraction unless we are talking about what we're doing. Give you a real quick story. My dad was driving home from my sister's house, and he called me, and we were talking a little bit about my nephews and about my sister, and and all this kind of stuff. And I asked Dad, I said, "Are you driving right now?" He said, "Oh yeah, I'm on the interstate." I said, well, respectfully, Dad, unless we're going to start talking about the traffic that's around you, you're in your lane, anybody coming up on you, I would rather not feel like I'm sitting in the living room with you having this complete other conversation around what you're not doing right now, which you need more focus on. So if you respect, I said respectfully, if you would like to talk about the traffic and you're driving right now, be more than happy to talk to you for your entire trip about that. But everything else, I think, is just going to be a distraction. Isn't that true? When we think about it, and the next time you're on the phone or the next time you're in a conversation, even if you're driving and you're on a phone, start to think about where your mind is. Is your mind with your body in the place where it's supposed to be doing a job to get home safely? Or is your mind already at home, leaving you vulnerable for everything that would happen between now and getting home? If you start to think too far down the line, that's where you're going to interrupt your focus for right now, and that's what'll get you in trouble. Does that make sense? Does that make sense? Anybody on the call that you got to be you got to be where your feet are. Your mind's got to be where your feet are. Good. We're getting to the end of this, and Jim, if you could talk a little bit, why should we use certified trainers? What are some of the reasons for that?
Litigation. If you were ever to get into a DOT recordable accident, and the first thing they're going to look at is, was this person road tested? Who road tested them, and how comprehensive was it? Were they?
How much money are you putting into your state training program, right? If you're building it in a house and you stand all alone with it, okay, we have little investment, right? We don't have a lot of investment in this right now. We don't have a third party looking at our program to see that it's worthwhile, right, Jim?
100%. And to piggyback on that, being able to have, we have some of the best trainers in the industry, guys and gals with 25 years experience that have been there, done that, got the t-shirt kind of type stuff, where they can talk through some of these conversations like yourself and have these, and make them relatable because they've been in that same seat as them and work through that. So I think it's so very much important that they're getting that information from the right subjects. It's great content, and it's something that these fleets, when they're talking about the litigation side of things, that they can have a partner to lean on when these issues do arise.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. You and I talk about consistency in practice all the time. If you are having a third party oversight of your program, here's the thing for everybody on this call to keep in mind. If you're shopping for principles of defensive driving programs, if you're looking for a defensive driving program for your organization, look for one that doesn't take it out of the box and plop it in and then make it fit with your organization. Look for a program that says, we know that you do something unique. We were hearing earlier, hazmat is a unique thing. It means that there's a unique mindset for it. So your safety training program should have that in mind. What do we do that's unique? What is our mission statement, our culture, and is the program that we're buying designed to fit within our organization, and not that we have to change our organization around to the program that we just bought? If you're looking at that, then look for a program where they do a lot of training needs assessment. They do a lot of working with you on the way that your program is going to work. I know that is one of the things our team on the driver training side at JJ Keller, that's what we do. When we go on site, we're also going to ask the application for the principles. How often are you having fixed object collisions? And we might put a little bit more to the range or the obstacle course. What does the course of your driver's day look like? Are they in city traffic, highway traffic? Do they drive mostly at night, at the day? We try to look at all of those things so that we can tailor this program and configure it for your operation. You also need to make sure that it's got a good assessment piece. Assessment is so important. Does it get the critical elements that you want assessed in place, and is it repeatable? I might check a box that says driver uses mirrors effectively. And what I would like to see is that if I check that box, then that's 100% if I check that box. but there is a gradation there. Could we say that this is acceptable, but needs, in these situations, needs improvement? So always look at your assessment docs to have that piece where we can say it's acceptable. We coached these things, and then we saw repeated progress, and see that on one test, so that you can start to record the behavioral adjustments that you were doing through your program. That's it. And I know we're getting to the end of our time here, and I just cannot tell you all how much I appreciate you being on this call. 833-982-1236. If you want to learn more about any of our programs, give us a call. Check out jjkellersafeandsmart.com, and you can see all of the programs that we have to offer. We would love to have a conversation with you. We would love to learn more about your programs and how we might be able to help you as you're designing your safety culture. Leave the last couple of minutes. Does anyone have? I'd like to ask if there was one takeaway from this meeting that you had that you're going to start into your program right now. What would it be? Pop it in the chat, or if you have any questions that we didn't get to the call, please let me know and we'll try to answer them. Thank you all so much for being here today. It's been an absolute pleasure being with you. Thank you for everything that you do to keep our roadways safe, to keep the transportation industry safe. It's a huge job. It requires all of us, and we are always at your service to help you do things a little differently, better, and get those results. Narrative driving, love it. Michael, I think that's fantastic, and there's a lot more to it. So as you're doing that, continue looking at these what if questions. How does this work? Are we asking the drivers those kind of things? Yeah, Smith System. I've been a Smith System trainer several times, actually, at a couple of different places. I've been a Smith System trainer for a while now. The thing is that if you have Smith as your training, as your defensive driving program right now, start to apply some of the principles of narrative driving into the Smith System, and you'll start to ask why questions a little bit better around those 5 keys that Smith talks about. So I've seen it. We've had this program in place with a company that already had Smith System, and boy howdy, the drivers that get out there and they say, okay, I'm aiming high and steering. I ask them why and what's the information that you're getting from that, and then how are you going to apply that? And you'll see it. Your drivers will start to go, oh wow, I've never been asked that question before. Well, I look at it for these reasons. So set them up for good coaching, make it a positive experience, teach your drivers and your organizations how to be that winning culture, and please give us a call if we can help at all. It's been wonderful having you on the call. Thanks for everything that you do. Jim, thanks for hosting this. Thank you for JJ Keller and Associates Safe and Smart Defensive Driver Training Program for hosting this event as well. And we will see you safely down the road.